Now that we have a clearer picture of the possible costs and benefits, we can move on to the next step of the paramedic method, the third step, which is to analyze the duties and the responsibilities. So first of all, your doctor has a primary responsibility to do his or her best to treat you and to protect your privacy. You have a duty and responsibility to pay your bills to your doctor promptly and to follow the instructions that your doctor prescribes. PharmCo is responsible for developing safe and useful drugs, and in return, its customers would pay for those drugs. In this research effort, PharmCo is hoping that doctors will enlist volunteer patient donors, and in return, PharmCo does promise doctors a small fee for each patient who volunteers. And then finally, both your doctor and PharmCo have promised to protect donors' privacy and are obligated to make a good faith effort to fulfill that promise. Most of the responsibilities we've discussed so far are fairly straightforward and uncontroversial, but there are other possible responsibilities that are less obvious and more controversial. So, like for example, we've already talked about intellectual property, the value of information when we talked about the case study with MP3s. So similar to this, we have some valuable information here. So, what if your genetic information includes an important clue to the treatment of cancer or some other disease? So if PharmCo does develop an effective drug based on your genetic information, they're going to make billions of dollars out of this. So should you get a royalty on the information in your genes? Does PharmCo have a duty to share your genetic information and the information from others? Or does its initial funding of the research give it proprietary control over that information? So, who controls that information? And then we talked about how your doctor told you that only a random number and a zip code would identify your skin cells. This gives you some confidentiality, and that's a good thing, but why the zip code? Why is the zip code part of the encoding? Is the geographic location part of the research, or is it important for marketing of drugs? There's no clear information about the importance of the zip code and why that's included. Or, is this study done all over the world, or just in the U.S., or specific zip codes? If we find out that your genetic information is valuable, can your doctor give you assurances that your privacy will not be invaded? As we talked about before, maintaining strict confidentiality would require a sophisticated protocol to make sure the information couldn't be linked back to you, and to protect information that's stored on computers and communicate over a network. And since both PharmCo and your doctor want you to volunteer for this process, they do have a duty to disclose these kind of details before asking for your personal genetic information. And then finally, do you have a duty to help cure disease in this case? If there's a chance for you to advance medicine by a simple donation process, is there an obligation for you to donate? Let's now consider an analogy to help us with this case study. So in this case, we're going to compare this to the blood donations that are done with the American Red Cross. So they do ask for blood donations, and the Red Cross is concerned about the quality of the blood that it distributes. So therefore, when you do give a blood donation, the blood is tested for certain diseases. If your donated blood turns out to be unusable, then your name is entered in a deferred donor database, and you're not allowed to give blood anymore. They don't want bad blood. So that's just kind of how it works. Sorry. Now, this means that the Red Cross cannot offer you complete confidentiality about your blood and any diseases that it discovers in it. However, the Red Cross is sensitive to the issue of confidentiality. They do have policies about test results and keep them confidential. Now, the Red Cross is also a not-for-profit organization, but it does incur processing costs associated with collecting, testing, and distributing blood. To recover these processing costs, the Red Cross does charge a reimbursement fee to hospitals that use the donated blood. The hospitals, they also incur operating costs, which appear on your bill. And one of the reasons that the Red Cross prefers volunteer donors is they found that people who do donate blood tend to have safer blood, or less likely that it's going to have donations. So they really do depend on volunteers for donating their blood. Now, blood donation and skin cell donation are similar in that the donors are volunteers, but the collectors and the eventual users of the donated materials are paid. But in both cases, it's something from donors' bodies that is being collected, and in both cases, the donors are asked to volunteer for these things. Now, with that said, there are some differences with these as well. So in the case of blood donation, the blood itself is an item of value, and both the donor and the collector are clear about what will happen with the blood. In the case of skin cells, it's the genetic information in the cells that is of value, not the cells themselves. Also, Pharmco is looking for something that it might or might not find in your cells. If it finds valuable information, then Pharmco stands to make a profit. So, I mean, they are looking for money out of this. So if it doesn't find the valuable information, it might take a loss on the subject, where the Red Cross and hospitals presumably don't make any large profits on your blood, although they do charge for its use. We've gone through the first 4 steps of the paramedic method, so now we have a better understanding of the situation. So let's take a look at the 5th step, where we would either make a decision or we can just loop through the method again. Now, if we have to make the decision right away, so maybe you're at the doctor's office and the doctor is waiting, you at least have some more information before. But let's say you have some time to think it over. So if you have that time, then you can ask some more questions. You can ask more questions of the doctor or a Pharmco. You might be able to think about more carefully on your own, maybe do some research online, just to find out more information to help with making the decision. So if you have the time, then you can revisit the earlier steps before making your decision. Now, most of these cases, we have not really given you an answer. Well, we're finally going to give you a recommendation for this one. So let's say that you're at the doctor's office and the doctor wants you to decide right then and there. So we would think that it's probably best to decline the invitation unless the doctor can give you more assurance about how Pharmco was going to store and use your genetic information. I mean, on the one hand, helping to find cures to diseases is a good thing, and the donation procedure seems pretty harmless, but on the other hand, you haven't been given much assurance about how your genetic privacy will be maintained, and the financial interests of the other stakeholders might give you some pause in it. So, I mean, some people may or may not agree with that conclusion, but here we're just trying to look at all of the complex issues that are attached to something that seems like a very straightforward request.